found Murphy at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, sitting in the back corner of Kennel 12. The day crew had processed him 6 hours earlier, and everyone said the same thing. Quiet dog, no problems. But when I knelt down and looked, really looked, I realized he hadn't moved since they'd locked the kennel door. Not his head, not his paws. His eyes were open and fixed on the concrete wall, and I watched for a full minute before I saw him blink. Once. The water bowl next to him was full, the food untouched. His ribs moved too fast, that shallow breathing that doesn't look wrong until you've seen it before in animals who've stopped asking for help. I'd been working night shifts at Riverside Animal Shelter for 3 years, long enough to know that the dogs who make the most noise aren't always the ones in the most pain. Sometimes the most broken ones have just learned that crying changes nothing. Murphy hadn't made a sound in 6 hours, and when I looked into his eyes, I saw something that made my chest feel hollow. He wasn't waiting to be saved, he was waiting to disappear. My shift started the way it always did, 6 p.m., Tuesday. The shelter emptying out as the day crew went home to families and dinners and lives that didn't smell like disinfectant and fear. I clocked in 2 minutes early, like always. Marcus, the day supervisor, was finishing intake paperwork at the front desk. He didn't look up when I walked in. "New dog in Kennel 12, he said, still writing. "Came in around 2. Senior owner died. Neighbor found him sitting next to the body. Animal control estimates he was there 3 days before anyone noticed." The air in the room changed, got heavier. 3 days? I repeated. Yeah, Marcus finally looked at me, and I saw something tired in his eyes. Honestly, though, easiest intake we've had all month. Didn't fight the leash, walked right into the kennel, no aggression, no stress behaviors, just, he gestured vaguely, compliant. That word sat wrong in my chest. I waited until Marcus left before walking back to the kennel area. The hallway smelled of bleach and something older, something that never quite washed away no matter how many times we scrubbed the floors. Kennel 12 was in the back corner, the quiet spot, the one we used for dogs who needed space. Murphy was exactly where Marcus said he'd be. Back corner, sitting upright with his spine pressed against the concrete wall, a mixed breed, maybe 40 pounds, with a brindle and white coat that looked like it hadn't seen a brush in months. His front paws were perfectly still. His eyes were open and locked on the wall across from him, like he was reading something written there that only he could see. "Hey, Murphy," I said softly. Nothing, not even the flicker of an ear. I checked his intake sheet. Male, approximately 7 years old, owner deceased, no known medical issues, no known behavioral issues. Then in Marcus's handwriting, exceptionally calm, no special care needed. But his water bowl was untouched. The food we'd left at 3 p.m. sat in a perfect mound, not a single piece disturbed. And when I crouched down and really watched him, I could see his sides pulling in and out too fast, that shallow, controlled breathing animals do when they're holding very, very still. I'd seen this once before. My childhood dog Max in his last weeks, that terrible stillness everyone mistook for peace. I dragged a chair over and sat down outside Murphy's kennel, not close enough to crowd him, just there. Murphy didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge my presence at all, just kept staring at that wall with eyes that weren't seeing anything anymore. And I understood something that made my throat tight. Everyone thought Murphy was handling this well because he wasn't crying, but Murphy had already learned that no one comes when you cry. I sat in that chair for 2 hours and 17 minutes. I know because I kept checking my phone, kept telling myself I'd get up in 5 more minutes, just 5 more, and then Murphy would move or drink or do something that proved he was still in there. He never did. By 9:47 p.m., the other overnight animals had settled. The beagle in Kennel 3 was snoring. The old lab mix was shifting on her blanket, making those small comfort sounds dogs make when they're dreaming of better days. Murphy made no sound at all. I pulled up his file on the computer, searching for something the intake report might have missed. The animal control notes were clinical and brief. Canine located in living room, seated position adjacent to deceased owner. Based on decomposition, officer estimates 72 plus hours post-mortem. Subject showed no food-seeking behavior, no distress vocalizations, no resistance to capture, appeared dehydrated, responsive to leash. Responsive to leash, like that meant something good. I kept reading. Owner was Margaret Wells, 73, lived alone, no emergency contacts listed, no family. Neighbor noticed mail piling up and called for a welfare check. Just a woman and her dog, and then one day she fell and Murphy sat down beside her and waited. For 3 days he sat in that apartment while it got quieter and quieter, while his water bowl ran dry, while his stomach cramped with hunger, while the person he loved stopped moving, stopped breathing, stopped being. And he didn't bark, didn't scratch at the door, didn't do any of the things dogs do when they need help. I closed the file and walked back to his kennel, carrying a bowl of wet food, the expensive kind we saved for the dogs who'd given up. I opened the cage door just wide enough to slide it inside, keeping my movements slow, unthreatening. "You don't have to eat," I said quietly, "but it's here." Murphy's eyes stayed fixed on that wall. His body didn't shift even slightly toward the food. I sat back down and watched him, really watched him, looking for any small thing, a twitch of his ear, a change in his breathing, one blink that lasted a fraction longer than the others. Midnight came. The wet food sat untouched. The water bowl remained full. And Murphy stayed frozen in that exact position like he was waiting for permission to exist that I didn't know how to give. But I was starting to understand something that made my hands shake. Murphy wasn't being calm. He was being invisible. Because somewhere, sometime, Murphy had learned that taking up space, making noise, asking for things, being alive, made everything worse. Thursday night, Murphy still hadn't eaten, hadn't drunk water, hadn't moved except when we physically carried him outside, and even then he just stood in the grass, legs locked, waiting for us to tell him what to do next. "We need to talk about intervention," Dr. Sarah Gregg said during morning handoff. She'd examined him Wednesday, run blood work, checked everything. His body was fine, healthy even. But Murphy was disappearing anyway. "Feeding tube by Friday morning if he doesn't eat," she continued, and I heard what she wasn't saying. "We're losing him." Marcus stood beside her, arms crossed. "I don't get it. We've tried 6 different foods, hand feeding, warming it up, nothing. He just sits there like he's not even here anymore." I'd stayed both nights, sitting in that chair outside Kennel 12, talking to Murphy about nothing important, the weather, the cat recovering from surgery in Kennel 8, how the vending machine was broken again. Murphy never looked at me, but around 4 a.m. Wednesday, I'd noticed something so small I almost missed it. His breathing had changed. Still shallow, still too fast, but the rhythm was different, like maybe somewhere deep inside where he'd gone to hide, he was listening. "One more night," I said to Dr. Gregg, "please." She looked at me the way she always did when I got too attached. "Jessica, if his organs start shutting down—" "I know." My voice came out rougher than I meant. "I know what happens. I've seen it before." I had. 12 years ago, watching my childhood dog stop eating, stop moving, while my parents kept saying he'd get better, kept waiting for him to turn around, until the day I came home from school and he was just gone, and I never got to say goodbye. Dr. Greg's expression softened. Tomorrow morning, that's all I can give you. That night, I brought my blanket from the break room, my pillow. Marcus would see it on the security footage, would have questions I didn't have answers for. I didn't care anymore. At 11 p.m., I spread the blanket on the concrete floor outside Murphy's kennel and lay down. Not inside his space. I wouldn't crowd him, but close enough that maybe he'd know he wasn't alone. I'm staying, I whispered into the dark. You don't have to eat, you don't have to move, you don't have to do anything. I'm not leaving you alone tonight. For a long time, nothing changed. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, Murphy shifted his weight. And when I turned my head just slightly, I saw him looking at me. For the first time in 72 hours, Murphy's eyes were focused on something real. You've been here for 9 minutes now. Most people would have scrolled away when they realized this wasn't going to be a quick, happy ending. But you're still here, which means you understand something important. The animals who suffer in silence need people who won't look away just because the story is hard. Murphy didn't give up during those 3 days. Don't give up on him now. Hit subscribe, because what happens next will show you why staying matters. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just lay there on that freezing concrete while Murphy looked at me with eyes that seemed to be asking a question I couldn't translate. Then he stood up. Not quickly, every movement deliberate, careful, like his body had forgotten how. He walked 3 steps to the front of the kennel, the side closest to where I was lying, and lowered himself back down. Still separated by metal bars, still 3 feet away, but facing me now. "Hey," I whispered, and my voice broke on that single word. "I see you." Murphy held my gaze for maybe 5 seconds, then he closed his eyes. Not sleeping, his breathing was still too controlled, too careful, but resting, actually resting. I stayed on that floor until 6 a.m. My hip went numb, my back screamed, the cold seeped so deep into my bones I couldn't remember what warm felt like. But every time I thought about getting up, I remembered those 3 days Murphy spent sitting next to Margaret's body, waiting in silence because he'd learned that making noise changed nothing. When Dr. Greg arrived for the morning shift, she found me still there. She didn't say anything at first, just knelt down beside me and looked into the kennel. Murphy had moved again during the night. He was pressed against the bars now, as close to me as he could get without touching, and the water bowl was half empty. "Jessica," Dr. Gregg said, very quietly, "I know. You can't do this every night. I know." She was silent for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and showed me something, animal control notes I hadn't seen. Margaret Wells had early dementia. Neighbors reported she sometimes forgot to feed him, sometimes forgot he was there for days at a time. The cold I felt had nothing to do with the concrete. How long? She was diagnosed 3 years ago. It probably started before that. Dr. Gregg's voice got softer. Murphy's teeth show chronic malnutrition. His coat condition suggests months of irregular feeding, maybe longer. I thought about Murphy learning to be quiet, learning that whining when he was hungry didn't bring food, that barking when he was lonely didn't bring comfort. She yelled at him when she was having bad episodes. Neighbors heard it, heard things hitting walls. I looked at Murphy, pressed against those bars, finally close to someone. He stayed with her anyway, I whispered. "After everything, he sat with her for 3 days." "Yes," Dr. Gregg said. "He did." And I understood then. Murphy hadn't learned that love was conditional. He'd learned that love meant enduring. Friday afternoon, I was in the break room trying to sweep before my shift when Marcus knocked. 3 sharp raps that made my stomach drop. "Jessica, front desk, now." I'd worked here long enough to know that tone. There was a man at the counter, mid-40s, expensive jeans, leather jacket that probably cost more than my rent. He had the kind of smile that looked practiced in mirrors. "This is David Gregg," Marcus said, and I caught something tight in his voice. "Says he's Margaret Wells' nephew. Says he's here to claim Murphy." The fluorescent lights suddenly felt too bright. "Murphy's not cleared for release. He's under medical observation." "I understand that." David's voice was smooth, reasonable. "But Margaret was my aunt. I've been overseas for work. Just got back yesterday and heard what happened. I'm family. Murphy belongs with family." He slid papers across the counter. Margaret's death certificate, a will naming David as executor, photos on his phone, him with an older woman at what looked like a birthday party, him standing in a living room I didn't recognize. "I didn't know Margaret had family," I said slowly. "We weren't close." Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. "I should have visited more, should have checked on her, but I can make it right now. I can take care of her dog." Marcus was examining the paperwork. Everything looked legitimate, but I was looking at David's hands. Soft, no calluses, no dog hair on that expensive jacket, shoes too clean for someone who walked a dog regularly. "When did you last see Murphy?" I asked. "Maybe 3 years ago? Family gathering. Margaret brought him. He was smaller then, still growing." "Murphy was 7. 3 years ago he would have been fully grown for years." "What color is he?" David hesitated, just half a second. "Brown and white, like now." "Murphy's brindle, dark brindle and white. If you'd actually seen him 3 years ago, you'd remember that." The smile faded. Marcus looked up from the papers. "We'll need to verify everything with animal control," I continued, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. "And Murphy's not ready to leave. He hasn't been eating. He's fragile." David's expression went cold. "I'll be at the Marriott for the next few days, handling Margaret's estate." He dropped a business card on the counter. "Call me when he's ready, but don't take too long. He's family property, and I have legal rights." He left. The door closed with a soft click that sounded too loud in the silence. Marcus stared at the papers. "His documentation looks real." "He's lying about everything." "How do you know?" I thought about Murphy, about 3 days of sitting in silence, about someone who'd claim a dog but couldn't remember his color. Because someone who actually loved Margaret would know her dog. Animal control called back in 43 minutes. Officer Torres, the one who'd brought Murphy in, sounded exhausted. Margaret Wells had no living family. We checked extensively when we seized Murphy. No next of kin, no emergency contacts, no relatives listed anywhere. Her neighbors said she'd been estranged from everyone for decades. My hand tightened around the phone. "Then who is David Gregg?" "Running his information now. But Jessica, there's something else you need to know." Torres paused, and I heard papers shuffling. Margaret's apartment was being watched. The break room suddenly felt smaller. "What do you mean?" "After we removed Murphy, I went back to secure the scene, found a notice taped inside her mailbox dated 2 weeks before she died. Someone offering to help with her dog situation, said Murphy was too much responsibility for someone her age, offered cash, no name, just a phone number. You called it." Disconnected. "But Jessica, there's a pattern." His voice dropped lower. "Last 18 months, we've had 8 cases. Elderly owners in low-income housing all got similar offers. Most refused. The ones who agreed, their dogs disappeared into resale markets within days. Craigslist, Facebook, sometimes broker networks that flipped them as rescue dogs for premium fees. I thought about Murphy, about how quiet he was, how he wouldn't cause problems, how someone could sell him as trained and calm and no one would know the truth. Margaret said no. 3 times, according to her neighbor. The last time whoever it was showed up at her door. Margaret called the police, but by the time officers arrived, they were gone. And Margaret, he stopped. She was having a bad day, I finished. Couldn't remember details. Yes, so no description, no evidence, nothing we could act on. Torres exhaled slowly. When she died, someone saw an opportunity. Dog goes into the shelter, they show up with forged papers, claim him as family, and he's theirs. We've seen it twice before. By the time we verify the fraud, the dogs are already sold. The front door chimed. Through the break room window, I saw David walking back in. No smile this time. Torres, he's here. Do not release that dog. I'm sending a unit now. David walked straight to the counter. I spoke with my attorney. You have no legal grounds to hold my aunt's property. I'll be back tomorrow with a court order, and Murphy better be ready for release. He left before Marcus could respond. Property, I said, and my voice sounded strange, distant. He called Murphy property. Marcus looked pale. If he gets a court order, he's not taking him. I was already walking toward the back, toward Kennel 12, toward Murphy, who'd finally started to believe someone might stay. He's not taking him, I repeated, but I didn't know how to stop it. Dr. Gregg called an emergency meeting Saturday morning. Me, Marcus, Officer Torres, and a woman I'd never met, Detective Lisa Park from the fraud unit. David Gregg's real name is David Castellano. He's been under investigation for 8 months. We've connected him to 12 confirmed cases of fraudulent acquisitions from deceased owners. Why hasn't he been arrested? Marcus asked. Because he's careful. The documentation is good enough to pass initial verification. By the time we prove fraud, the dogs are sold and he's gone. She turned the laptop toward us. We've never caught him in possession. Photos filled the screen. A golden retriever, French bulldogs, a Bernese mountain dog, all with elderly owners who died alone, all claimed by relatives who turned out to be David. What happens to them? My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. Park's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Most get sold within 72 hours, premium prices because the paperwork makes them look valuable. The buyers think they're getting well-trained adults. She paused. The ones who perform well enough get rehomed. The ones with issues, the ones who shut down or won't eat or can't bond quickly. She didn't finish. She didn't need to. I thought about Murphy's silence, his stillness, how he'd only just started eating again, how he wouldn't perform for strangers, wouldn't wag his tail or play or do anything that made him look adoptable. He won't sell. Murphy won't. He'll just sit there, and when David realizes he can't flip him for money, we need to stop him before it gets that far, Park said. Torres filed a hold on Murphy pending investigation, but David's attorney will challenge it. We have 72 hours, maybe less, before a judge orders his release. The room felt airless. What do you need? Dr. Gregg asked. We need proof he's running a scam. We need him to admit intent, or we need to catch him attempting to sell Murphy, something concrete that ties him directly to fraud. Torres looked at me, really looked at me. He thinks you're just a bleeding heart tech who got too attached. He came back yesterday because he wanted to see if you'd fold. I know you want me to call him, I said. Tell him Murphy's ready, that you reviewed his paperwork and you feel terrible about the misunderstanding, that he can pick him up tonight." Torres glanced at Park. "We'll be waiting." My hands started shaking. "If something goes wrong—" "Nothing will go wrong," Park said, but her voice was too steady, too practiced. "But Jessica, understand this. If David suspects a setup, if he walks away tonight, we lose our window. In 72 hours, some judge who's never met Murphy will order his release to whoever has the best paperwork." I looked at Dr. Gregg, at Marcus, at the photos of all those other dogs. Then I picked up my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. "What's his number?" I made the call at 2:14 p.m. Each ring felt like it lasted an hour. "Mr. Gregg?" My voice shook. I didn't have to fake it. "This is Jessica from Riverside Animal Shelter. I wanted to apologize. You were right. I was being overprotective. I had no right to question your paperwork or your relationship with your aunt." Silence on the other end, long enough that I thought he'd hung up. Then, "I appreciate that, Jessica. I know you care about the animals. It's admirable, really." Something about the way he said admirable made my skin crawl. "Murphy's doing better," I continued. "He's eating now, moving around more. Dr. Gregg says he's cleared for release." I took a breath that hurt. "You could pick him up tonight if you want, after hours around 8 p.m., less stressful for him with fewer people around." Another pause. I could hear him breathing. "That's very accommodating. Are you sure?" I let my voice break. It wasn't hard. "I just want what's best for Murphy. And your family. He should be with family." "I'll be there at 8. The line went dead. I stared at my phone. Detective Park was nodding, but I felt sick. "That was good," she said. "Natural." The next 5 hours and 46 minutes were the longest of my life. Torres positioned plainclothes officers in the parking lot. Park wired the front desk. Dr. Gregg went over the plan 3 times, but I stopped hearing the words. At 7:30, I went to see Murphy. He was lying at the front of his kennel now, not pressed against the back wall anymore. When he saw me, his tail moved, just once, just slightly, just enough to break something in my chest. I opened the kennel door slowly. Murphy watched, but didn't retreat. I reached out, let him smell my hand, and he pressed his head into my palm. The weight of it, the trust in it. "I'm not letting anyone take you. I promise. I promise." Murphy's eyes held mine, and I saw something that made it hard to breathe. He believed me. At 7:59, Torres radioed. "Vehicle just pulled in. Silver sedan." My heart stopped. "He's early." 7 minutes. Park's voice crackled through. "Everyone in position. Jessica, bring Murphy to the front." I clipped the leash to Murphy's collar with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. He stood slowly, uncertain, and we walked through the kennel area toward the lobby. David was already there, leaning against the counter like he owned it. "There he is," he smiled. "Hey, Murphy, ready to go home?" Murphy went completely still. Not the stillness of shutdown, something else, something that made every muscle in his body go rigid. Then, from deep in his chest, a sound I'd never heard him make, a growl, low and steady and full of recognition. Murphy knew him, and David's smile vanished. "David Castellano," Detective Park said, stepping out from the back office. "We need to talk about Margaret Wells." David ran, made it 4 steps before Torres blocked the door. The paperwork scattered across the floor, fake death certificates, forged ownership documents, and a bill of sale already filled out. Murphy's name at the top, $1,200 at the bottom. "I came to the apartment," I said, my voice barely working.
Didn't he? He's the one who tried to take you from Margaret. Detective Park was already reading David his rights, but she paused. We'll need your statement. 4 documented visits, Torres said, checking his notes. Neighbor confirmed, said Margaret threatened to call police the last time, and a man matching his description told her she was too confused to care for a dog, told her Murphy would be better off somewhere else. I knelt down. Murphy's growl had stopped, but he was shaking now, pressed against my leg like he was trying to disappear into me. She didn't give you up, I whispered. Even when she was confused, even when things were so hard, she kept you.
And Murphy had stayed with her anyway, even at the very end. They took David away in handcuffs, found texts on his phone coordinating with 2 other people, screenshots of ads he'd already drafted to sell Murphy as a trained therapy dog for $2,500. Park said it would be enough to charge him, enough to stop him. When everyone left, it was just me and Murphy and Marcus in the lobby, surrounded by scattered fake documents. "What happens now?" Marcus asked quietly. I looked at Murphy, at the way he was leaning into me, not hiding anymore, choosing. "I'm adopting him." "Jessica, I know all the reasons I shouldn't." My voice cracked. "I know I'm too attached. I know it breaks protocol, but Marcus, he sat with her for 3 days. He stayed when anyone else would have run. And now—" I couldn't finish. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone. "I'll start the paperwork." 3 months later, Murphy still has nights when something I can't see triggers something I can't fix. When he goes completely still, eyes unfocused, and I know he's back in that apartment, back in those 3 days of silence. On those nights, I sit on the floor beside him, not touching, not pushing, just there. And eventually, sometimes minutes, sometimes an hour, his breathing changes, his eyes focus, he presses his head against my hand, and he comes back. He's asleep on my bed right now, stretched across the blankets like he's always belonged there. Some mornings I wake up and watch him breathe, and I can't believe this is real, that this dog who learned invisibility as survival now sighs in his sleep, that these same eyes that held so much nothing now watch me leave for work and wait by the door until I come home. Murphy didn't learn to trust quickly. He still doesn't bark much, still goes quiet when he's scared, but he learned something else. He learned that some people stay, even when it's hard, even when it breaks rules, even when it means lying on concrete floors and making promises that terrify you. Murphy taught me that love isn't fixing someone, it's showing up. It's sitting in the dark places and not looking away. And every single day, when he rests his head in my lap with that soft, steady breathing, I'm grateful I stayed, because he would have stayed for me too. Murphy's story didn't end when he was rescued. It started there. And there are more dogs like him right now going silent in shelters across the country, waiting for someone to notice that their stillness isn't peace, it's shutdown. If this story moved you, if you stayed until the end, then you already understand what matters. Subscribe, because these stories need people who won't look away, people like you. And Murphy needs you to remember that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is just refuse to let someone suffer alone.